Hey. So we're having a lot of technical difficulties this morning.
So sorry about that. Sorry, we are late today. It's just been one of those mornings.
One thing after another. Our internet's like, we may even cut out. Our internet's been absolutely just doing strange things this morning. And yeah, so we've been trying to get on. And so sorry, we're like half an hour late. But you know what? Better late than never. So welcome to the Heart of an Underdog show with Javi and Jessica, where we talk about how to adapt and overcome your biggest health challenges so you can beat the odds, live in victory, turn your pain into purpose, and overcome all your technical challenges all in one day. Hey, listen, today we're actually going to talk about something really important. Today we're going to talk about on our show all about telling your story. So when you've gone through something, you've gone through your health battle, you've really gone over and over the things that are bringing you through it. How do you tell that story, that powerful story?
Or if it's something that was the most challenging thing in your life, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't a health battle, but it's something that you had to come back from.
Mhm.
Maybe it was a mental health battle.
Yeah.
Something that you really had to fight against.
Fight through. I mean, we have a lot of people that have come on our show talking about depression, talking about autoimmune, all things.
Right.
So stay tuned for that because we're going to dive into that today.
Okay. And remember to share and subscribe. Make sure to subscribe and share this with your friends and family, okay? You can always download all of our other previous podcasts at heartofanunderdog.com or wherever you play or hear your favorite podcasts, okay? If you want to catch our live show, this time being on time, okay? We are usually here every Saturday morning at 9:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I promise you, you could catch us on facebook.com/Heart of an Underdog.
Yeah. And look, if you want to become a sponsor of our show, we have a brand new gold sponsor, Christy Ann Madrigal, our dearest daughter. She's a police officer, a respected police officer in Utah. And she's absolutely just been behind everything that we're doing. So thank you so much. We love you so much. Thank you for becoming our first gold sponsor. If you want to become a sponsor of our show and you want to get behind the mission, you want to partner with us, financially speaking, to make sure that we are able to put out the content, the inspiring stories, the experts that we have on our show. If you want to be a supporter and a sponsor of this show, make sure you jump over to javiandjessicamadrigal.com and you can pick any level of sponsorship that works for you. You can sponsor us for as low as $5 a month. Every little bit counts. We greatly appreciate anything you're doing. And you can even give a one-time gift in your support. So we appreciate all of that because it really helps us impact lives for better health for people overall. So today we were talking about how to tell your story.
Yeah, look, we're late and we still have people coming in. We appreciate. Oh my gosh,
Annie, what's going on? We love you,
Annie, our faithful.
You the best. Our faithful fan. You're our fan.
Yeah.
But listen, so often we get asked, did you always tell this story? And he did not always tell this story. Hey, good morning, Monica.
Good morning, Monica.
Good morning. Happy Saturday. Your story.
Our tribe is showing up. This is great. So no, you're right. You had been trying to get me to tell my story for many, many years.
Yeah.
And number one, why did I feel that I didn't want to share my story? I knew I had been through it. I knew that not everybody was like me, because everybody that is fighting heart disease that I was around, they had a different approach. Their approach was sadly to give in to the disease and not really live their life like I talk about. And I've never been that way. I've never will be that way. But I didn't think I had a story to tell. And my wife said, yes, you do. She believed in me. So first of all, the first step is I had to start believing that I had something to say. Then I had to believe that there were people out there that would be interested in what I had to say. And not only interested, but inspired and needed to hear my story in order to pull themselves up and out of that darkness they fell into because of their disease.
Right. And I think one of the most important things that happened is you realized, and I think so many people out there probably haven't realized yet, if you're struggling with telling your story, is that really your story was something that God wanted to tell. God wants to tell your story. God is going to use your story to impact lives in the way that only God can. So it's not all about you and you telling the story. It's not all about what you can do to impact lives. We put so much importance on ourselves, not necessarily in like a self-centered way, but more
Mhm.
like, oh, I don't think I can do that. I don't think I can impact lives. I don't think I could change lives. Well, no, it's not always like that. It's not really about you changing lives. It's about God changing lives, but it's about us being willing to share our story. We have to share. We have to be willing to say the words, but God's the one that's going to change those people's lives through the story that he created victory in. Keep in mind, we've overcome it with Christ. So then the story is then glory be to God, right? God's the one that gets the glory in this, because so many times you could have died like 35 times. I swear at this point, he's like 6 cats. He's got like how many lives? I don't know. So he's overcome things that not even just heart disease. Like you overcome meningitis, you've overcome vertigo, you've overcome, there's so many things, and it is absolutely nuts. Because there's so many times that God has gotten the glory in your life, but when we share the story, we are giving glory to God, which is what impacts those lives. But we have to be willing to believe that God wants to do something through us, and it's not that we have the most powerful story, or that we have the most important story, or that everybody wants to listen to me. It's not like that. If you believe those things, that's what it's about, it'll be really hard for you to share your story because you're like, oh, nobody wants to listen to me. Remember, it's God's testimony.
Right. No, absolutely right. So one of the first things I had to do is really kind of break down that story.
Mm-hmm.
I had to figure out what was it that I felt that led to that mindset. Okay, I know a lot of us talk about mindset, but really, in this is very important. We need to dig down, and you need to figure out, okay, what is it do you feel about you that is different? Your approach, how you approached it. How did you look at it? Well, I just did it. And that's what I said for many years. Okay.
Yeah, you're like, I don't know, I just lived it. I just overcame it.
Yeah. But what was it about you? What, maybe even go back and go, if you have to go back to your childhood, what ingrained that into you? Okay. I remember talking and maybe it wasn't just one moment. Maybe it was just this series of things that happened into your life journey before you got to this point that taught you to be a certain way. And then you learned how to be that way. You know, one of the things I talked to Dr. Madrigan about,
Mm-hmm.
because him and I have a common interest, our common thing, and that was wrestling. Now he's has been a very accomplished wrestler, a national champion at freaking
55 or whatever
50s. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, this an incredible man, but he lives and breathes wrestling. Okay. Now, I'm not talking about WWE type wrestling. No, I'm talking about the Olympic style wrestling you see, the Greco Roman wrestling, right?
Yeah.
That type of wrestling. Well, that was a really pivotal part of my life, even though I wasn't as accomplished as he. The things that were instilled in me and the belief I had in me changed my life. Okay. Before then, I've always been a smaller person. Okay. I've always been vertically challenged.
We're very small people.
Being vertically challenged as I have, you get bullied.
Yeah.
Okay. Now look,
yeah,
growing up,
I think we all got bullied.
Yeah. I mean, we all did, but it wasn't like it is really today where it's such a thing.
Hey, good morning, Angelica.
Good morning, Angelica. But the thing is I got bullied because I was little. So you always had the big guy, on the playground picking on you, and you weren't as strong. And so growing up that way as a kid, you think, well, I'm not as good as everyone else. I'm not as strong as everyone else. I'm not this and not that. So, I loved football and I played football. I was pretty fast. I ran track and I kept up with guys and beat guys that had longer legs than me. Of course, my legs had to go.
Because we have to run super extra fast.
I had to run 10 times harder and faster, but I still did it. I was still faster.
Yeah.
I love sports, but because of my size, I wasn't able to, compete really. And until I fell into high school wrestling. And when I got there, again, going back further, my dad, I remember, we always had a punching bag, in our gym, in our garage. And some of my best memories is my dad just showing me how to punch and to work the bag. And I would spend hours hitting that bag until my knuckles bled. Okay. And I remember him having me just build up those scars and heal them, and then hit the bag some more, hit it some more, and just toughen up my fist. And then going into wrestling, that it just stepped it up a lot more. I was still the small guy. But I became stronger. And what was taught to me is that everybody's equal inside that pit, inside that ring. And in wrestling, you have just a round ring. Okay. And that's where you start. And everybody's equal there. And I remember wrestling people twice my size. And I, I got it through. At first, it was just humiliating, but then pretty soon I gained respect. When I gained respect, people started noticing. When people started noticing, I started gaining confidence. And then I started hearing people call my name when we would compete in the crowd, cheering for me. That lifted my spirit even more. And I believed that I could do it. So I worked harder and harder. And people were telling me I couldn't do it. People were still telling me that I was nothing, but I kept pushing. So how is that story relevant? Well, when I had to fight the biggest fight of my life many times, okay, I was back into that pit. And sometimes it was the disease. Sometimes it was the depression. Sometimes it was the people coming against me.
And sometimes it was something like financial, because you had to take time off work or miss work, or you be in the hospital for a month or whatever. There was always some reason that this fight was that you felt like an underdog, and that underdog spirit started with you when you were going through that wrestling stuff.
So for me, I had to go back then to figure out what was it about me that is not going to give up.
Yeah.
That underdog spirit, where was it born? So for you, if you have a story to tell, what is it that is making you different?
When you go back, that's one of the main things we really wanted to bring up. When you're telling your story, a lot of people are like, well, that's great for you. I mean, that's a cool story, bro. But I don't have that in me. I'm not that person. I'm not the person that's just like, oh, I'm never going to say no and I don't give up and blah, blah, blah. But like, so what makes me feel like I can do that? And that's what we're saying is you have to go back and think, what is it that makes that part of you come alive? Is it your faith? Is it your parents? Is it a teacher? Was it a coach? Was it, your dreams and ambitions, like in your career or your interests? Was it, what was it that brought you to a point where you felt like I have something to fight for?
Right.
What is that? For me, I had such a large portion of my life that was just toxic, a dumpster fire. I was lost. I was around toxic people. Like I became a toxic person. It was just nuts. Like I wasn't really serving God. I had a whole portion of my life where I just rebelled against God, and just like, I even talked to him about it. Like, I'm just not ready to jump after the stuff that you want me to go after. Like, I was really not where I wanted to be. So then when I finally got to where I wanted to be with God, all I ever want to do now is make sure we're good. Like, I want to be the person who can look myself in the mirror at the end of the day and say, you know what, I'm doing we said this morning to each other. Hey, God is finally, well, not just finally today, but I mean, this is where we live in our life, is that God's watching us. We are doing the things we said we would do. We are good with God. There is nothing to, apologize to God for. I mean, we all have sins, and we all have like little things that we're like, oh, I'm sorry or whatever. But I mean, like, there's the direction of our life is really where I've wanted always for this to be, is that I wake up and I serve God. Right? Whatever that looks like. And if he and I are good, then I'm successful. And so the reason why I bring that up is because one of the biggest motivations for me to overcome no matter what is because I want to make sure my faith is the biggest thing. I want to make sure that me and God are good. Right? So that I don't want to let him down, and that's letting me down. And letting me down is hard because I let myself down for so long. See, so there has to be a deepest motivation. So what is that deepest motivation, and where did that come from? For me, that came from a deep faith, but also a contrast. So sometimes it's like, I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back to living like that. Or for you, one of the things that you've told me is it wasn't that you necessarily didn't want to go back to where you used to be. It's that you looked around you and didn't want to go where everybody you saw was going.
Yes.
You were like, I don't want to live like that. I don't want to fight heart disease that way. I don't want to give up. I see what giving up does. I'm looking all around me going, I don't want to be that person.
I'm not going to be that person. I remember being in my first cardiac therapy class.
Morning, Alonza.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us.
My first one after my bypass. And I was the youngest person in there. I'm in my 30s.
Yeah.
No, excuse me. I was in my 40s, but I'm the youngest person in there. And I see people older than me, obviously fighting this disease. And most of them had conceded to the disease. They were depressed. They didn't really want to exercise. They didn't really want to really move on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But there was this one gentleman. He was in his 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this guy was running on the treadmill. He had 9 stents in total. He had bypasses. I think he had some other procedures. And this 90 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now look, he wasn't sprinting, but for him, that was amazing. And that stood out to me. And I'm like, well, I'm not going. If this is what I'm going to have to do, I'm going to be that guy.
Right.
I don't want to be like everyone else. I'm going to be that guy. And so I just visualize myself as that person always fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And he had been in cardiac rehab many, many times.
Yeah.
And so I look, that was my first, during that time, it was my first time just kind of saying, all right, that's my example.
Right. And so when you're telling your story, so go back to now, so we're, speaking to people who you've been through this, you've already overcome your big health challenge or your big, mental challenge or whatever the battle you've already overcome. You've had victory. You're like, I did this.
Yeah.
So now what do I do with this? Now, who do I tell? What do I do? So when you're writing your story down, because again, that's the first thing you should do is start writing this out. It doesn't have to be anything but
and it doesn't have to be perfect.
It's just raw. Just write it.
And this is the other thing. Okay. The next thing is to believe that what you wrote down, someone needs to hear that. Someone needs to
someone else is going through this.
What you went through. You need to paint that picture of what you went through. Because just like me, I was looking at that gentleman and what he'd been through in his life and what he's doing. He's thriving. He's running on a treadmill and he's not giving up. I mean, it was a huge contrast between people 60, 70, 80 years old and him at
Mhm.
90 years old and
Crushing it.
yeah, crushing
Really.
it. So someone needs you to look at, to emulate.
Right.
They need you to help. They need your story and what your success story and how you approach life and how you approach your life spiritually, how you approach your life physically. How do you get up every day when everything hurts?
Right.
Okay. They need to hear that. They need to hear that realness.
Yeah. So if you're just joining us, thanks for popping in. We are doing a topic. We're going over a topic today that's really important. You know, so many people have these health battles that they go through and they overcome and they recover and they're like, wow, it was like a miracle and God was there with me. And like, I have this huge story, but like, how do I tell that? People ask me how I did it. And I don't know. I just did it. How do I break that down? Does anyone even care? So a couple of points we've already gone over just to kind of recap if you're just jumping in is number one, you got to write it down. You just write down what you've gone through. Write down the whole story. Write down what happened. Write down what you were thinking. Write down what you were feeling. Write down where you got. We've gone over a whole bunch about where you got this underdog spirit in you. What was really the force that drove you to not give up? Was it your faith? Was it your parents? Was it a teacher? What was it? Who was it? A person? Was it just something in you? You know, where did you find that motivation or that spirit in you that just said, I'm not going to take no for an answer? So write that down and kind of work that out. And then the last thing we were just talking about is you got to believe someone needs that. You got to believe you seriously are not the only person that's been through this. There are people right now suffering that God's trying to use your story to heal, and it's going to happen. Right. So now that you've written it down, you've gone over like everything in your head, there's no organized, state to the story. You've just told the whole thing. Start picking out things that you see other people going through. Or maybe you think, this was a really big part of what made this happen for me. Start organizing your thoughts a little bit better, and then once you've gotten all that written down, start telling your story to people around you and say, was this your experience? Is this how you saw me going through this? Or maybe jump into a Facebook group and start telling your story, or a Reddit forum, or something on, get into the comments on YouTube or wherever it is that you hang out online. Get in there and start asking others, is this what you went through? What do you think? And ask the questions in these forums where you can get feedback and people are like, yeah, that's exactly what happened for me. Start encouraging others and you'll start to realize that your story is very common. So instead of getting out there and just, it's not like you're going to write a book tomorrow or, be a speaker on a stage tomorrow, but maybe you just start small and you start jumping into little groups of people and saying, hey, what do you think about, is this common? Did you guys experience this too? Now, here's the thing. They maybe didn't, but you did. Right. And that's unique. And you still need to tell that story. Right. You're going to find that somebody out there also feels very alone about what they went through. There is someone else that needs to hear it. And if you help one person with this story, that one person out there with the very rare thing that you may have experienced, that person only has you. And that's why you need to tell your story. Maybe it's not the masses you're supposed to help. Maybe it's that one human being who feels very alone, because this is a rare thing. We have a friend who is still experiencing a very rare form of cancer. She doesn't have a giant audience of people going through this, but she knows that it's very important that she shares her story because somebody out there is going through this, and she's fighting hard for, legislation about it and all this stuff. She knows that there's people fighting this just like her, that it's a very rare and lonely thing to go through. So that's why it's important too. So the next thing would be what are some of the bigger ways that people can share their story once they're kind of to that point?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I think it's very important is jumping on a podcast. All right. Now, look, it doesn't have to be a podcast like this where we oftentimes, most of our podcasts, we video. It's not just a audio podcast. We do a podcast that is on live on Facebook or YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
But it also goes, you can also listen to it on the regular traditional type podcast platform. So maybe it's just you speaking.
Yeah,
so
maybe start with that. You're not on video.
Start with a podcast that's you're not on video, because I know video, especially at first, can be very intimidating, and you're thinking more about how you're being presented on camera rather than just talking. Okay. So what I would do is listen to some podcasts that kind of is in that that lane of the story that you're telling. Okay. Look, there are millions of podcasts out there.
Yeah.
I guarantee you'll be able to find not only one, but two or three at the very least. Okay. But take a listen, see what other people, how they're telling their story, and visualize yourself telling your story on their podcast.
Right.
Then once you find a podcast that you are, that you would love to be on, reach out to them and speak with them and say, hey, I have this, I've overcome this. This is where I'm at.
These are my results.
I would love to be on your podcast and share that with your audience.
Now, how would they find a podcast? So one of the ways that we have found podcasts to be on to tell our story of overcoming heart disease and all of that is if you get into, there's podcast groups on Facebook. You could do that. You could Google podcast collaborations, things like that. There are groups of people and services where they help you find podcasts to be on that are relevant to you. There are groups where you could just jump into the podcast group and start asking questions about how, you could even go in there. Oh, I have this story. Could someone help me? Like, kind of, how do you get on podcasts and tell your story? There's a lot of people willing to help you out with how to organize your story.
Well, absolutely. But you could even start off just listening. Just be a listener.
Yeah.
So you could, there are so many different podcast platforms nowadays. I mean, we're on Podbean, but you could also hear us on Apple, Spotify.
What is it?
iHeart, Player FM, and
Amazon.
And there's a new one.
Lot.
There's a new one that we're always.
Stitcher.
Yeah, Stitcher's. We're going to be on Stitcher here soon, and we're always appearing on different platforms. So you could, like, for example, you could find us just listening to us on any of those platforms. So if you've never listened to a podcast, start listening to some podcasts. Yep. Go on your phone, and whether you're on Apple or Android, they usually they'll have apps, okay, that you can listen to podcasts. Like I said, we have Apple Podcasts. You could do iHeart. All of those apps are free. Doesn't cost anything to listen. Okay. So if you aren't comfortable going on a podcast group or whatever right now, just start listening. And when you find your favorite podcast, reach out to them and say, hey, I have this story. I would love to be able to tell it. What do you think? And look, some of the bigger podcasts with huge millions of listeners, those are probably tougher to get on.
Right.
Okay. But
depends on your story.
But yeah, depends on your story. But take your shot. What do you got to lose?
Because look, God wants to tell your story. And if God wants to tell your story and you just need to reach out, sometimes he'll make a way, right? Well, he'll always make a way where he wants a way to be made. So, sometimes we've had times where we've reached out and got on things that we were like, wow, how did we get in so fast? Because God wanted our story to be told. He wanted us to connect with that person. So some more things about you that you could try. And I have a couple more comments about actually telling your story. But let's say you don't want to actually do a verbal interview. You're like, I'm not ready to just tell my story. Like maybe it's still too emotional, or maybe you're just not comfortable speaking. You're like, I don't know. You could do guest blogs. So if let's say, for instance, just as an example, it's the easiest example is he has heart disease. He's been through heart disease. Let's say we reached out to, I don't know, American Heart Association or something, and they have a blog and they're like, having to always come up with new blogs. These bloggers that are doing like heart disease related blogs love inspiring stories. They're always looking for more content, and they don't want to be the ones to have to write this. They want guest bloggers. They want to tell people stories, but they're busy. And so they're like, anytime someone can come in and just write their story, you know what I mean? And you don't have to be a perfect writer either, because they usually have editors for their own blogs. They'll say, oh, well, we'll edit it. But you could be writing your story and then getting better and better. And once you get your story written the way you want it, then you can start doing those podcast interviews and saying, well, I've got this dialed in. I know my story. I know that it's resonating. I know it's helping people. You could start there. You know what I'm saying? And you could be submitting your story to websites, for their publications too.
Yeah, exactly right. And look, guess what? There's still magazines and newspapers out there too.
Did you know that?
Okay. So, and they might just be in digital form.
Yeah.
Okay. But they could be both. They could be still on the traditional magazine or newspaper, but they could be both digital and print. So, just before, well, right in the midst of the beginning of COVID, just before COVID hit,
Yeah.
I was approached by a magazine company called Health Monitor, and they reached out to me and they wanted me to tell my story. They wanted to profile me, and I was on their cover and everything else. I was very honored, but I can't remember how they heard about me. I think
they reached out to me on Instagram, so they had a
because
person.
This is the other thing. That's where I was going. Okay, so what you could also do if you have Instagram, you have Facebook, all those things, just to kind of start breaking out of that shell, start writing your story in little bits. Tell a little bit of your story here, a little bit of here, just putting yourself in different situations and basically telling your story step by step, not in this big long thing.
Yeah, you could just tell parts of your story on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, like whatever. You could just
telling your story in a way to give value to someone else. Very important. It's don't approach it as, oh, I want to tell my story just to lift. It's not about you. Really, it isn't.
Yeah, if you're going to tell your story, this really is only about the people that you're helping.
If you really want to tell your story, and tell your story because you want to help someone else, because for me, I don't want anybody to go through this, what I went through. I don't want anybody to have to go through the journey I had to go through. So if I could impart just a little bit so that it lightens the load of that journey, their own heart journey, then that's what I'm all about. So imparting things that's going to help people in their daily life, inspiring them.
And that could be little bits of your story, like he said. So you could be doing stories, like on actual stories, like on Instagram and Facebook. Hey, Angie. Hey, welcome. Thanks for joining us on our show today. This could be little bits, and you're just thinking, oh, I know, like when I said earlier, when you get into these groups and these forums and you're finding out what people really struggle with, hey, maybe I'm not ready to tell my whole story, but maybe I could just find out what people really want help with through my story, and I could just focus on those questions. So you go into groups and you say, okay, I'm in a group for heart disease where I want to be helpful and inspiring. You look for questions that you know the answer to. Well, I went through that. Well, hey, have you tried this? Have you tried that? So then you're helping people with little small bits of your story. And if they have questions, you could go answer those questions that people have most commonly on your social media publicly, like on your stories, on your Instagram posts, on your live. You could do live videos on Facebook. And that's why I was approached, because I had been sharing his heart disease story, my story too, because I'm a caregiver. It's really our story. But I was sharing that on my Instagram, and these people had somebody who was scouting for stories, because again, publications want stories. They're media. Your local newspaper in your town might want something inspiring to put on the news, or in the newspaper. You could reach out and say, hey, I had this incredible story. I just thought maybe people might be helped by it. Do you think that's something you'd want to feature? All they can say is, well, that doesn't really fit us. No, thank you. And then, maybe we'll reach out later. Or they'd be like, wow, yeah, we've been looking for an inspiring story. Let's feature you. And what they did was they interviewed us over the phone and over the internet. They wrote out the story. They asked us questions and we submitted those. Then they sent out their own photographer, which was really fun. We were like, this is cool. And they took us out to wherever, and they did a photo shoot. We ended up getting the photos that they didn't use, which was great, for free. And then we got a bunch of copies actually of the magazine. And these were magazines that were going into doctors' offices that people can pick up and read. And so it was really fun, because we were like, oh my gosh, people will see our story. And now that's a way where we're helping people that we don't even know. We're impacting people's lives, helping them through our story that we'll never meet. Our story is like floating around out there in a magazine. So there's ways for you to share that story and to get that off your chest and get your heart out there to impact lives.
Yeah. So now maybe you want to do something more hands-on, maybe more of a traditional way, offline. Now, look, let's be honest. That's going to be a little bit more difficult
with COVID
currently.
Yeah.
Okay. But, let's pray that we'll finally get past it. I believe at some point we will get past it.
Yes.
Okay. So what can you do if you want to be more of a hands-on person? Maybe you're a person that has overcome cancer. Maybe you're a veteran. Okay. You veterans out there,
Mm.
the people, what you went through, and maybe you suffered through PTSD and you've gotten help and you've gotten past that and you're now living a successful life. Okay. But you veterans, your fellow comrades need you, especially right now. Everybody's going through a hard time right now and they need your voice.
Mhm.
So maybe whatever you're going through, maybe you can volunteer some time.
Mhm.
If you had cancer, maybe go back to that hospital that treated you
Mhm.
and say, how can I volunteer? How can I help other people?
Right.
And maybe you just are a soundboard for someone else that is going through what you had to go through. If you're a veteran, go
Go to
to
the VA.
go to the VA. And oh my gosh, there are tons of programs and things that you can volunteer for
Mhm.
at the VA. So one of the things why I want to just kind of pause for a second. Why do we feel so passionately about people sharing their story?
Mhm.
Okay. Look, on social media, there's a lot of people sharing stories that aren't true. It's a facade
Mhm.
most of the time. Okay. People put up a front because they want to look a certain way, they want to sound a certain way. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about helping people that are struggling with their day to day lives. We all struggle, people,
Mhm.
right? We all do. But what we tend to do as a society is we all withdraw to our own little silos, our own little spaces. And this might be my story, but this is my story. I'm not going to share it. And even though my neighbor, my friend, or someone I don't know, we know that they're going through something similar, but I'm not going to say a word. I'm just going to stick to my own little world, my own little silo. They're going to go through what they're going through. I have nothing to impart. That's not true. If we as a people would help each other
Mhm.
up another rung up that ladder, help them up out of that dark pit that they've found themselves in. Can you imagine our society, looking at our society now through that lens? Wouldn't we be a stronger people? Wouldn't we then be more united? Would we then look past skin color? Would we then look past cultural biases? We would look more at people, what they're going through,
The
and
human
the
experience.
human experience, and helping people with what they're what they're currently going through in their life. So that's what we're trying to push forward and trying to spread with you today. Is your story is relevant, and we need to help one another through it. And I think if more and more people, I just truly believe if more and more people would do this, there's so many things on social media that's junk, help people with this, help, earn $1 million here in 6 days, in 6 hours, 6 minutes, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. How about let's just all help one another?
One of the things that people say to us a lot is, well, I don't have any credentials and I don't have any expertise and how am I supposed to help people? Here's the thing. People don't want to hear from the experts all the time. People run from their doctors. They go see their doctor. They're like, cool, doc, thanks for all the medication and the berating today of like how I'm not doing a good job and I need to lose weight. Thanks a lot. And then they bolt and they're like, you don't understand. Like this guy has never been through what I've been through. When you tell your story, not only is that person not feel alone, but they feel seen, they feel understood,
Yep.
they feel heard. Okay. They don't feel alone anymore. And you're the one they want to talk to because they're like, You did it. But you went and did this. This is something that you can tell me the little bitty stuff that happens day to day. Like my doctor's like, here's the big stuff. But what about when I leave? What about when I leave the doctor's office and now I'm supposed to just live this way? And what about when nothing the doctor says works for me? You know, we interviewed somebody last week who she's like, okay, I could have listened to my doctor all day, but here's the thing is I was allergic to all the medications. So nothing was working that they were doing. And I had to go find out how to fix this myself. Right. And sometimes you're forced into that position. Is that what you were going to say?
Yeah. Well, the thing is I'm over here like wanting to jump in. Sorry about that. No, but the thing is number one, we aren't against doctors. No. There are amazing doctors that we know personally that are doing amazing things in medicine and helping people, changing people's lives. But because I know them and because I know what they do with their patients, even they would agree that they only see a small fraction of a person's life in their fight against whatever. They treat the body, they treat that maybe the disease, the symptoms or the symptoms. They'll give you advice. They'll even give you medications. They'll give you the treatment that they know that they've studied and they know as best as possible. Look, there's some other doctors out there
that are humans and still fallible.
Yeah, and yes, exactly. But that's only a fraction of your life. Okay. What about those side effects from the medication?
Yeah. What about your food? What about all the other things?
How could you speak to that to someone that is going through that? How can they get past it? How could they live their life better while taking the medication, while going through treatment? Hello, 12 steps, right?
Yeah.
So what is it that's going to keep them going? What is it about you, your story, that's going to keep them going? That doctor is not fighting cancer. That doctor is not fighting heart disease. That doctor's not fighting arthritis. That doctor has never seen the battlefield. Okay.
Maybe they have, but you also have to understand that they couldn't even follow up with you the way that they would want to, even if they could, even if they wanted to, exactly. or did go through those things. Maybe they have, but there's only so much they can do. They're limited on the amount of time. So when you're telling your story, these people that are struggling and frustrated, they have the opportunity to listen to you and to connect with you and to really go deeper with you and go, oh, and now I understand how to deal with this. And I understand what about this? And they can ask you questions and say, well, what do I do with when I'm thinking this? And what do I do when my family doesn't understand? And what do I do when my friends don't understand? And what about, man, there's so many little facets of our lives.
So when we get back to credentials, don't let that be your limiting belief. Don't let that limit you and stop you from doing your part, from stopping you from telling your story, because people need you right now, today. People need your story. They need your perspective.
Right.
And you are letting them down, believe it or not. So don't let something like that, like credentials, stand in your way. If that's something you want to do later in life as part of your growth plan, then great.
Go get the credentials.
But you need to get started. Don't let that stop you from getting started.
But here's the thing. I just, something really just came to me is, since when does God care about credentials?
That's right.
He doesn't care at all what credentials you have. And I'm telling you, he will use you far beyond and far before ever credentials enter the picture. Because that's the thing, is it is about his credentials. It is about his power, his glory, his victory. It's not about your victory as much as his, because he's the one that's healing. He's our healer, right? He's our keeper. Like, he's our creator. He's our father. It's more about sharing what victory has happened through God. That has nothing to do with credentials. What bigger credentials could we have than what God has done in our life? You can argue credentials and training all day, but you can't argue with results, friend. You can't argue with the experience of overcoming something, and on the other side, that you have victory and you have results and you have changed and you have healed. You can't argue with healing. You can't argue with results. And life is the credentials. Thank you, Alonza. Life is the credentials. Thank you. Exactly. Because that's the thing, is when you've overcome this and you've come out on the other side, guys, that's it. You don't need any more than that. In fact, when you can prove that something happened, people don't even care how. They're like, just tell me how to get this done with my life.
Angie says, your
story
your
is relevant.
story is relevant.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
true. Exactly right.
And, I see so many amens coming through the comments. Thanks, guys. I really think that, we planned on just talking about this simply today, but this has really turned into such an amazing topic because we wanted to just share that people really struggle with telling their story and getting it out there, and God's trying to do a work through you. And, don't let, well, how am I going to share it? And how do I write that down? And who do I share that with? And it seems like a lot of work. But then God's really pulling at your heartstrings, right? He's really calling you to help those that are suffering. Aren't we called to help those that are suffering? And what better way than to use our story? And let me just bring up one last thing before we let you go, is that don't we want the suffering that we go through to mean something? Don't we want our story to not be a waste of time? Don't we want it to have intention and purpose and something to come out of it that's like a beautiful blossom out of this, wasteland that we felt like it was we were going through while we were suffering?
Right.
We want that to mean something. So at the end of the day, there's so much purpose and truth and impact and life that can come out of our suffering through God in other people's stories. And that's our obligation to do that. Once we've gone through something, don't let that be for nothing. Let that be for all of God's glory and the impact and shift in someone else's life. And at the end of the day, when you do that with one person, you've succeeded. You've done the work. And you know what? But you can help more than one person. There are so many people suffering.
There's so many people right now. And your story, you are relevant. Okay. Now look, I just want to recap before we go.
Mhm.
Okay. First, number one, believe in yourself. Believe that you have a story and you are relevant. Your story is relevant.
Mhm.
You have something to say. So write it down. Start writing it down. Who are you? How did you get through it? And how did you overcome it? Okay. So write that story out. Once you get that down and you have it pretty concise, get out there. Go on to social media if you have to. Go on your own page and just start breaking it down. Join groups, seeing how you
Talk
could
to
be
people.
talk to people, seeing how you could be more relevant and impart bits of your story to these people in these different groups that are suffering where you once suffered. Okay. Then start reaching out even more. Once you get confident there, you can, like I said, you can do more hands-on, volunteer in your local hospitals or your local groups where people gather that are suffering from certain ailments. Volunteer,
Right.
spend some time with those people, help them.
You could also volunteer nationally online if there was a company or an organization who needs coaches or mentors, even just mentors, people who've been through this. Hey, would you be willing to help the people that are suffering, to just get on a call with them, or to just help them through their suffering, or to just be inspired, be a mentor to them? Maybe there's mentor programs or coach programs or something that you don't need credentials for.
Right. And reach out to the podcast community and get on some podcasts. Maybe you can find someone. Then if you start getting more brave or you're more comfortable on camera, get in front of the camera and start telling your story and jumping in these groups and joining these communities where you can join these either maybe a YouTube channel or a video podcast like this, and really speak to your story a little bit more deeper and join groups that you're able to gather. The bottom line is, I said earlier that when it comes to you, it's not about you. Mm-hmm. It's about the people that we're helping. Right? That's true. But you know what the hidden blessing is you will receive even more healing.
Yes.
You will reap a reward tenfold. When you see that person that you got to know through your story, you started getting to know these people, and you seen where they have come from, and you see them actually taking the steps, living their life, and start to thrive and to overcome, and you see their life change right before your eyes, that is the biggest gift that anybody can give you.
Yep.
I mean, I'm speaking.
That's the
from my
gift.
own-
That's a gift from God.
Exactly right.
You know, something just came to me too. I know we were going to go, but it's just really quick because we didn't really reach.
We have to have like
three
or four.
endings.
Yeah.
Well, because we love this. We love speaking about these things with you guys because these are questions we get all the time, but also it's our heart. You know, we talked about the other things that you didn't quite get to yet is like get on the guest blogs and things like that. But look, what if you're like, well, I've been guest blogging and I've been getting on podcasts. What about if I really want to start? I'm confident now. I want to get out there and do more. Hey, you know, there's ways I have contacts. You want to contact me? I'll give you the contacts. You can write a book. You can be a bestseller on Amazon tomorrow with your book. Get that book written, get that story written. People are doing it all the time. It is not nearly as complicated to get published as you think. I thought it was a huge deal to get published. It is not. I can set you up the right people right now. I had no idea. I have contacts. You know, if you don't have any contacts, let me know. You could write your book. You could get it out there and help people all over the world. International bestsellers. I have a ton of friends who've written their stories of overcoming massive battles, and they're bestsellers. Okay. Also, what if you want to do your own podcast? Do that. I've seen people who don't do anything except just a podcast. There's a gentleman who is in our free group, and I've met him in the other heart disease groups, and he has this incredible heart disease story, but he's so witty and funny and just kind of like dry humor. And he has this podcast, and he's just kind of like a quiet guy, but he's so funny, and he's just got this podcast, and he just shares his story with people through that. You know, we have a friend who we met through being on our interview podcast, this one, a few weeks ago, and he does clothing. He gets his story out there through a clothing line, an inspiring clothing line, and then reaching out and volunteering at a children's heart disease camp. I mean, there's so many ways you could use your story to impact lives. So just know that whatever level you're comfortable with, remember, dive in there, but it can grow. You can continue getting more and more confident and listen to what God's telling you to do with it and go after your calling. And, you know, your story of suffering and survival and recovery and victory, that story is God's story. That is your purpose. That is your victory. That is your impact. Let it be for everything instead of for nothing.
Yeah, exactly right. All right, guys. I hope you guys got something out of today. I really do. I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, no, I was just going to say, remember, if you want to sponsor this show, if you want to support the outreach, if you want to support the content and the inspiring stories and the guests and the experts we're bringing on here, if you want to support all of our mission, you know, make sure you're jumping over to www.javiandjessicamadrigal.com. You can be one of our silver or our gold or platinum sponsors or a one-time sponsor, whatever is comfortable for you. But guys, every little bit counts towards this mission. We appreciate you partnering and being a part of this mission. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah. And one of the other things I wanted to say, maybe right now you're listening to this and you're in the midst of the storm. You're really struggling. And you're listening to this podcast because you need that helping hand. And we are here once a week. Okay. We're here every Saturday morning.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But you want to go a little bit further.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We have all kinds of resources to help you to take it one step further. You know,
yes, we're here to walk alongside you through your health battle. We've done it. We've done many health battles in our family, not just heart disease.
Right.
And we help lots of other people walk through their battles and see amazing results of just getting on the other side and finding their victory.
Exactly right. So look, reach out to us. We have a group coaching program that we work with you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We meet together once a week. We have one-on-one sessions. And we walk everything out with you. Okay.
Absolutely.
And to help you to discover a new life, the life that you really want to live so you can thrive and get past.
And have longevity and have energy and live live out the dreams and goals that you truly want, that you feel like you can't have now.
Exactly right. Yeah. So I just want to share that with you. Reach out to us. What's
Make
the
sure
best?
you message us.
What's the best way for them to reach out to
I
us?
am actually going to put up right now. This is where you can email us at support@javiandjessicamadrigal.com. You can email me there. You can also just message me on Facebook. Message either one of us on Facebook, and we will get you going on a call with us to just discover how we can help you. It's a free call, no obligation, just a consult to just kind of check us out and see if we're a good fit and see if you kind of feel like we can do something for you in your situation. That's what we want to discuss with you. So to make sure that you have everything that you need. We're not about selling you stuff here and giving you stuff and doing things that you don't need.
If you are listening to this broadcast, on our podcast, not live, you're listening to this on replay, be sure to hit like if you got some value out of it. I hope you did. If you want to share something, please comment.
Yep.
If you need help and you want to reach out, you could reach out to us right there on that platform, and we will respond and we will get back to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us this week. This has been an absolute pleasure and joy. Thanks so much for all of our live viewers who chimed in. You are our favorites.
My gosh, you guys are the reason why I do this. I love you guys. We appreciate everything that you guys have done for us. You have no idea how much that means to us, your support. Yeah. So we love you guys. I want you guys to have a great weekend, and we will see you next week. Bye.
See you later. Bye-bye.